In this video, I'm going to be driving a 1987 Mitsubishi Starion and debunking 3 misconceptions that people have about them. At least they used to, because blokes in pubs don't talk about Mitsubishi Starions very much anymore, because these cars have become very rare. This one is one of just 14 left on the road in the UK, which is a real shame, as we'll see. But before we get to that, I'm itching to bust the first myth. The first myth is about the name, which is not derived from Japanese people not being able to say stallion properly. That is a complete fiction made up for casually racist giggles, which unfortunately made it into Jeremy Clarkson's script in 2005. So lots of people think it's true.
Marvellous.
Mitsubishi themselves have always said since the earliest promotional brochures that it's a contraction of Star of Arion. Arion being, of course, Hercules' horse in Greek mythology. Any alleged joke about those silly Japanese people talking funny is clearly nonsense, otherwise Mitsubishi would presumably have also given us the Garant and the Rancer Evolution. And speaking of names, if you're watching this in the US, then you'll know the Starion was also sold there as the Chrysler Conquest. At least it was by the time this facelift car was built. Earlier ones were badged as Dodges or Plymouths, depending on what shop you bought them from. The Conquest got a 2.6 litre engine rather than this car's 2 litre, which was bigger but slower, thanks to a smaller exducer fan on the turbo. Which just goes to show that whoever said there's no replacement for displacement hadn't been forcibly inducted into the ways of forced induction. In fact, let's talk about this engine next, because unless you're a Mitsubishi fan, the Sirius 463T might just be the most legendary power unit you've never heard of. This car runs a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine mounted north-south and driving the back wheels via a 5-speed gearbox. It's Mitsubishi's own engine, and their own turbocharger and their own gearbox come to that, with a cast iron block and an alloy head containing 8 valves pushed up and down by a single overhead camshaft. In this iteration of the Starion, it puts out 177 brake horsepower at a rather full-on 6,000 RPM, which is also the red line, and a chunky 214 pound-foot of torque at 3,500 RPM, which is about the same rev level as the turbocharger joins the party. There's a bit of a story there, which we'll come back to in a minute. This Mitsubishi 4G63 engine is something of a legend among engine fanciers, powering all sorts of things from pickup trucks, vans and small lorries to rally legends. I've said legend several times, but there's some justification for that. It first appeared in turbo form in 1980 in this, the original Mitsubishi Lancer Turbo 2000, complete with Turbo 2000 written in mirror writing on the front spoiler. The turbocharged 4G63T went on to power not only the Starion and various Gallants and things, but several generations of Lancer Evolution up to the Rally Art Evo 9 FQ300, in which the 300 is for horsepower, there's a pretty astonishing number of horses for a 2-litre road car, and the FQ stands for effing quick. The 4G63T powered 4 consecutive Group A World Rally Championship titles for Tommi Mäkinen, and in the Group N class for showroom-ready cars, Mitsubishi's won the title 7 times in a row from 1995 to 2001 with this engine, until they were finally beaten by a Proton in 2002, which was also running a 4G63T engine. Besides being famously robust and highly tunable though, the Sirius engine is also very smooth for a 4-cylinder, thanks to Mitsubishi's patented balancer shaft system. 2- and 4-cylinder engines are inherently unbalanced. I made a video about this, which I'll put a link to at the end. And balancer shafts are a way of evening out the rocking movement that's inherent in the format. Mitsubishi didn't invent the concept, that was down to British engineer Frederick Lanchester in the early 1900s, but they did refine it with their silent shaft arrangement. No sneering at the back. And there's a deliciously ironic story about that, which I'll come to later. Back to the Starion in the meantime though, European buyers did eventually get the option of that 4G54 2.6 litre engine that the American cars had, which has similar power but a bit more torque and is less revvy. That would make a lot of sense to me in an executive saloon, but to my mind it kind of misses the point in a car that looks like this. That does raise a question though. Reading some reviews of the car before I met up with it in the metal, I was a bit concerned that it might suffer from a lot of old school turbo lag, where on pressing the throttle nothing happened and then more nothing happened, and then suddenly a whole herd of horses were unleashed mid-corner and kicked the tail out. And that, I'm happy to report, is myth number 2, which is actually in 2 parts, and those are both all about the driving experience. Got a cup of tea now. Where were we? Yes, performance. And there's the turbo. It comes in very progressively. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting it to be a bit more of a lag and then a kick, but it isn't. It's much more progressive than that. It comes in somewhere around here, just above 3k, and then it just keeps on giving. And you run out of road before you run out of turbo. Brakes are good too, they're nice and progressive, but there's plenty of bite as you keep pressing the pedal, so they give you confidence to barrel along up to a bend and then brake for it if you're feeling like a hooligan. And it's an interesting mix because it does let you drive in that slightly hooligan-like way if you really want to, but you don't have to. It doesn't require it. It's not popping and banging and snarling and being grumpy if you don't thrash it and if you drive it relatively gently, which must make it quite a good companion on long distances. And it just feels like you could kind of do this stuff all day. And if you get stuck behind somebody going slowly, then well, that's okay, because you can get past them at some point later on. It's all good. As those Young and Rubicam Pirelli ads used to say, power is nothing without control. And like a lot of Japanese cars of the era, the Starion has recirculating ball steering rather than rack and pinion. So the question is, does it handle like Carl Lewis in stilettos? Yeah, one of the criticisms that people make of the car is about its steering, but actually I think it's just fine. It's very placeable, there's no kind of slop in it, it's not vague, you can tell what the wheels are doing. It's perhaps not the most precise about the straight ahead, but that's not an issue. On tight twisting curves like this road, and also the longer, more flowing bits, it feels just fine, it's really good. And the power comes in progressively, so you can apply it at the apex. So cornering is a real pleasure. Yes, overtaking is a pleasure as well. I'm loving the pedal setup. It's really good for heeling and towing, so you can just hit the brake with your ball of your foot and just blip the throttle with your heel, and as you drop down into second, and it's just really nice and really smooth, perfectly set up for that. There's a little bit of, I mean, you can kind of do that with the wheel and maybe, but I mean, who cares? When you want to go around a corner, it goes around a corner. It goes where you want it to. Just fine. We like. The Starion is a delight on these roads up in the hills of South Wales, and is also very agreeable on the motorway, where it can be a relaxed cruiser at a bit over 2,000 RPM around the legal limit. So you can get the best of both worlds, which is ideal in a GT. I'd pick these back roads every time though, and we weren't the only ones appreciating them. We got chatting to Kirk here, who was out exercising this gorgeous Ford CVH engined Westfield of his. And he owns another car as well that I got very excited about. We might be seeing some more of him on the channel in the coming weeks, so do hit that notification bell if you'd like to know more. The ride is a little bit firm, but for a sports car, no complaints at all. This road surface is very bumpy, and you can feel that, but it's not unpleasantly harsh. And it just corners really nice and flat, so it's a great compromise, I think, in terms of the balance between absorbing bumps and keeping you level for maximising grip. And it's a lot of fun to drive, but at no point are we actually exceeding the speed limit here. It's got that 80s car thing of it's a lot of fun to drive fast, but not illegally fast. Unlike some later, faster things, they feel really anodyne at legal speed limits. You need to be on a track to actually get any enjoyment out of them. This isn't like that. This is a lot of entertainment on an A road like this. I have ridden in the back of this car before, kind of sideways, and you can do it for a short distance if you're reasonably flexible. It would have been quite challenging though for Jackie Chan and Richard Keel in the Cannonball Run to fit in there with a whole lot of early 80s 8-bit computing gear as well. Cannonball Run 2 is a documentary, right? Yeah, thought so. This car belongs to my friend Ben Hooper, whose name you might recognise from his regular column in Classic Retro Modern magazine, which I entirely recommend, by the way. Ben does have a couple of other cars, an Audi 80 B2 and a Volvo 480, but they're both a bit off their feed at the moment, so he's running this Starion as his daily driver. I asked him how that was going.
As a daily prospect, it's definitely an older car, you can definitely tell that, but it's far more usable than you'd expect, because you first think 80s turbos, they're finicky, they're a bit fussy, the driving dynamics are quite binary as you said, but it's a very refined car that works with you more than anything. Once you build a relationship with it, it's a very rewarding thing to drive. As an ownership prospect, I'm still relatively new to the car, so I'm still working out its foibles and what it's happy with and what it's not. It makes noises every now and then. You think, well, what is that? No obvious cause, and makes me wonder if I should be worried or not. But by and large, as a car to live with, it's very civilized. One of the things you've got to watch out for is just how civilized it is, because it has the balancing shaft tech in the engine. It's very good at pretending to have more cylinders than it does. It's a bit of a character actor in that sense, because you'll be bombing along on the motorway and you won't realise you're doing 85 because it feels like you're doing 70. It's that smooth. It's no V8, but it's definitely a much more refined GT than its on-paper specifications would suggest.
So as a classic car today, the Starion is not only a lot of fun, but also a pretty realistic ownership proposition, as long as you find one that isn't too rusty and hasn't been thrashed to death or driven into a creek to escape the Smokies. But an interesting question is, would you have bought one when they were new? Nowadays, the Starion is often compared with the Porsche 944. They're a similar size and approximate shape, they've got similar performance, and both have those signature bay window style widened arches that give them a wider track for better grip and distinguish them visually from older variants, the narrow body Starion and the 924 in the case of the Porsche. But back in the autumn of 1987, when this magazine came out, roughly when the original owner of this car was probably making his or her buying decision, the Starion occupied a rather different place in the market. The Isuzu Piazza and the Nissan Silvia were both a similar size to the Starion, but not quite in the same performance league. The Isuzu had recently had its handling sorted out by Lotus by this time though, so both were decent drivers' cars and do look quite bargainous, especially the Piazza. On the face of it, the Audi Coupe 2.2 looks well priced as well. Obviously this isn't the Turbo Ur Quattro, that cost roughly twice as much. It's the normally aspirated inline-5 with front-wheel drive. But that's still a nice car, if not especially sporting. Being a German car from the 1980s though, that £14,500 price will be before you've added any frivolous options like a radio, while the Starion already came pretty fully loaded. The Mazda RX-7 is an interesting one. This was the Porsche 944 lookalike second generation RX-7, still with a rotary engine of course, but much more late 80s modern steering and suspension. Even so, Car Magazine was very clear in saying at the time that the Starion was miles better. For some other interesting alternatives, the impact on our original buyer's wallet does start to add up quite a lot. There's the Saab 900 Turbo 16S, if turbo lag is your thing and you don't mind front-wheel drive. The 16S is the one with the body kit. You could save a few £100 for the more discreet Turbo 16 without the S stuff. But let's face it, if you wanted a subtle Q car, you probably wouldn't have shortlisted the Starion. An extra £2,200 would have got you into a Ford Sierra RS Cosworth, which is an appreciably faster car than anything else on this list, and a better long-term investment too, as long as you manage not to have it stolen, or wrap it around a tree in the wet, or put any miles on it for that matter. That one that sold for £596,000 the other month was a limited edition RS 500, and those were a little bit more expensive when they were new. But the cooking versions these days still fetch between about £45,000 and £60,000 at auction. They were a bargain when they were new though. Another £500 would have bought you a Lotus XL. Another car that got wider hips in middle age, like the Starion and the 924, 944 and I don't know what else. Similar performance to the Starion with no turbocharger, but 16 valves and great handling of course, and some Toyota bits as well to add a healthy dose of Japanese reliability. To get yourself a Porsche though, you'd need to spend another £2,000 on top of that. That bought you a 924S. Again, with no options. The 924S is the one with Porsche's own 2.5 litre engine, as by 1987 they dropped the base 924 with the 2 litre originally designed by NSU. And yes, its cylinder block did also see service in the Volkswagen LT van and the mid-70s Audi 100. And here's a little known fun fact for you: the AMC Gremlin, a 944, even in base Lux spec, was a whopping £23,504, and again, that's before any options. The 944S and Turbo were a whole bunch more money again. Would the 944 Lux beat the Starion in a back-to-back test? Perhaps, marginally, but for the price of the 944, you could buy a Mitsubishi Starion and a Peugeot 205 GTI. And there's a fantastic irony here too. After complaints that the VW Group engine in the 924 wasn't smooth enough, Porsche designed its own balancer shaft system for the 944. But they weren't happy with how it worked, so they bought in a better system for the production cars from Mitsubishi. And if you're wondering why balancer shafts are needed on 4-cylinder engines in the first place, but straight 6s don't need them at all, then watch this video and I'll tell you that story next. That was a very catty thing to say, wasn't it? We'll edit that out.